My name is Jane Mulcahy. Welcome to Law and Justice. Today I am joined by Jim Sporleder, who is a trauma-informed education specialist from Walla Walla in Washington. Hi Jim, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on today.
Thank you so much for taking the time during this strangeness that we are experiencing in terms of the global pandemic, and also America is going through a very tough time now. Because of the recent killing of George Floyd and the uprising there, and the protests. We'll talk about that a bit later, Jim. But maybe to begin with, you can just tell me a bit about yourself, your background, your professional background, and how you got interested in the area of trauma, please.
Well, I started my teaching career as a special education teacher. So I was a classroom teacher for 13 years. And but I said I would never, ever go into administration, but I did. And went into an administrative position and then as an assistant principal and then principal at a middle school here in Walla Walla. And it was my dream job. I was there for 22 years. I had every intention of retiring there. It was my family. I was at the place of my career. I was hiring alumni kids as teachers, and
Nice.
it was a very exciting time. And felt very good about what we were doing. And the Walla Walla School District had an outsider come in and do a assessment on our alternative programs, and I don't know why he came to see me. I didn't even know the district was doing that, but he came by and he wanted to share what his findings were, and I thanked him, and I kind of just put his report aside, and geez, it must have been 2 or 3 weeks before I even brought it home to read. And once I read it, it was heart-wrenching. Kids were sharing that they did not feel safe going to school. They felt like they were labeled the bad kids. And I knew that. The school was labeled the worst school that you could be sent to. And I knew it was a one-way trip. Our high school, when they sent kids there, they were not welcome back. And so after reading that report, I was sharing with my wife, that no kid should come to school feeling afraid. And the staff said the same thing. They said that we're afraid for our safety here. I mean, staff, there were cases in which staff were abused, physically abused or assaulted rather.
Okay.
Gang fights were breaking out in the building. You'd read in the paper about a gang fight breaking out in the street in front of the school. So reading that and being I was very frustrated that a school could get to that level and not have some type of intervention. And I kept complaining to my wife about it. And one night she said, "Well, maybe you ought to go." And I said, "Well, heck no, I'm not leaving."
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. I said, I didn't say me, I said somebody. But
Yeah.
I'm a person of faith, and that gnawing inside just wouldn't let up. And I finally realized that I felt like I was being called. So I asked the superintendent to transfer me there. And his first response was, "Why would you want to go to that school?" And I asked him, "Did you ever read the report?" And so that started my journey. I left my dream job. I went over. It wasn't called Lincoln High School. It was actually called Payne Alternative High School. And
Okay.
walked into a job that I had every intentions of wanting to change the culture. I wanted the kids to feel valued. I wanted them to feel safe. I wanted the staff to feel safe and valued. And be honest with you, Jane, I got over there and I didn't know if I was going to make it or not.
Okay.
It was so out of control, and just a typical response of asking anybody to do anything was "F you," and
Right. Okay.
what are you going to do about it? And so it took me some time to where I finally felt like I got control, and I had to get the control from the gangs. They didn't want to give up control.
Okay, of
And,
course. And how did you do that, Jim?
when I went over there, as much as I loved kids, I was traditional in my discipline, and I did the only thing I knew what to do. I carried a big stick and I used it.
Okay.
If kid, I just started. I met with the police department. I met with the probation department, and I just said, "You guys got to get behind me and help me." And I started arresting kids for disorderly conduct. If there were any gang issues, that I had them arrested. And as soon as I started that, it actually started settling the building down.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how would I have responded? How would I have responded differently if I would have known what I know now? I
Right.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
But you
even
came down heavy. Sorry, you came down heavy in order to improve the baseline of safety for everyone, I'm guessing, is it?
I came down heavy, and when I was confronted about being heavy, I told the kids, I'm being heavy because I'm committed to creating a safe environment and one in which you will feel valued. And I kept giving that message back to them that,
Mm-hmm.
and we were making, once we got control of the safety piece of it, we were making progress, and kids were beginning to buy in, and we were seeing some positive things happening. And then I was invited to go to a conference on trauma, and I was in my third year, and I felt like I had a SRO, a school resource officer, so I felt like I could go. And it was the first time I had ever heard about toxic stress.
Mm-hmm.
The speaker, Dr. John Medina, just turned me upside down, really. I always believed that behavior was a choice, and I
Right.
always believed that out of compassion, I needed to teach kids responsibility and hold them accountable. And I used out of school suspensions in order to what I thought drive the message home, but always said, "You're welcome back." And man, after 90 minutes with him, I hit the door like a bull in a china shop, and I knew that I had to change it. I came to the understanding in that 90 minutes that I was punishing kids and I wasn't teaching them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what drove the internal drive to find out how do you implement this kind of a system within your school so that you're teaching and not punishing.
Yeah, that must have been a big shock to the system, all right. And I had a similar one. I come from criminal justice research where, we have a similar kind of thing about behavior being rational choice oftentimes, and that we choose to behave in ways that violate the rights of others. And learning about trauma does turn that on its head. It kind of pulls off the blindfold, and all of a sudden you see your own behaviors or those of family members quite differently depending on bits and bobs of the narratives that you have. And certainly I imagine gang teenagers, you just start looking at them in a slightly different way. But can I just ask you, what was it as a young man that attracted you to the education field in the first place? Was it about teaching the core curriculum, or I presume you liked kids and wanted to instill a love of learning in them?
I had some teachers along the way that maybe more so coaches along the way that had a huge impact on me, but I I really struggled in school. So as a child, I was a behavior issue, and
Oh, right. Okay.
that was because of my learning disability and frustration. Definitely, I know I was ADHD before that term came out,
Okay.
uh, and then my father was a minister, so spare the rod, spoil the child.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
A bit
uh,
stern.
yeah, I actually went into teaching, to be very honest with you, to share with kids what I wish teachers would have said to me. I mean, I got shamed a lot.
Okay. For your
Yeah.
for your learning disability, is it? For not being
Well,
as quick.
and behavior,
Okay.
my dad was my hero. I wanted to be like him. Um, never felt worthy enough, but I wanted to be like him, and so I would have teachers tell me that my dad would be very disappointed in me. Uh, I was always reminded that my dad was a minister,
Right.
and my behavior didn't reflect that. And so, if an adult tells a child something, the adult is always right.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they would say, your dad would be very disappointed in you, then I believe that he was very disappointed in me, and I internalized that, and didn't make things easier on the
No.
teacher, but
Right. Yeah, well, I suppose that's the distress again, isn't it? The emotional turmoil that children can feel. And when we become less rational, then because we can be hijacked by these emotions. But what would you wish they had said to you, Jim, when you were displaying these behaviors or having challenges, just focusing and learning?
well, it's interesting, and that's a great question. Is that the kids that I have, once I was able to change my framework and thinking, and I see it especially now because whenever I get into schools, I always ask for some time to where I can visit with kids just by myself, and I hear it over and over and over again, where kids will tell me, I can't ask for help because I don't want other kids to know how stupid I am.
Okay.
And I can relate with that. I didn't want kids to know that I was calling myself stupid from within. In fact, thank God my parents didn't tell me until later in life, but they were called in, and two of my elementary teachers told them that they needed to find another pathway for me, that I would never make it through college. And
Wow.
so,
And
uh,
these narratives are very harmful, aren't they? Because as you said, we can fill ourselves with these stories from a very, very young age, especially if we're told these type of things from kindergarten onwards, that will never amount to much, or we're not the smart one in the family, we should take another route. That can be a self-fulfilling prophecy for lots of children.
yeah, I truly feel that, my dad shared it, and he shared this story later in life. He told me that after going in for one of those parent meetings, many of them, but one of them, that when he walked out, he said he told my mom, I've got to spend a lot more time with Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the time, and it was a profound moment for me, because my greatest memories was always being with my dad, and when my dad came home from work, we were the neighborhood football games, the neighborhood basketball games, softball, whatever season it was, uh, and I was fortunate that I did have some athletic ability, and so on the athletic field, I was very successful, and that was pleasing to my dad, and it finally, the older I got, when I got into junior high school, if you didn't behave in class, you didn't play. And
Right.
So I actually turned my behavior to, I mean, I was a modeled student once I got connected to sports and made the connection that if I screwed up, then that meant I wasn't going to play, and I was not going to risk that. So, but the internal feelings of unworthiness and feeling stupid was always there. But you know, I think some of us learn how to put that game face on and try to hide that. And
Sure.
so I spent a lot of my life trying to hide that. Even when I went into the profession, I had some of those feelings.
I think they're quite common, Jim. I mean, they may not be exactly the same or for the same reasons, but one of my favorite books that I was reading a while ago for my research was "Hold On to Your Kids" by Gordon Neufeld and Gabor Mate. And they're talking about how teenagers are often defended against vulnerability. And, you know, the more intense their peer attachments and the weaker their relationship to their parents, the more likely they'll engage in antisocial behaviors, drinking, drug taking, gang behavior, and the like. But this feeling of having to hide our vulnerabilities, you know, just to be in the world and to be accepted by our peers, and indeed in the workplace to be accepted by our colleagues, that, you know, we have to have a facade of competence, and all of that is quite common. You, though, and your school, the school that you went to, came to international attention with the wonderful film called Paper Tigers, directed by Jamie Redford, and that's how I found out about you. But can you tell me, how did the film come about, Jim?
You know, we had no idea that when we started down this journey, you know, I was sharing when I got back from that conference, I had a mentor here in town. Walla Walla is actually nationally known as a trauma-informed community. And so I had that leadership support, and her name's Terry Barilla, and Terry really shadowed me, and she knew how hungry I was to get the information. So she really helped set up some professional development, and through that professional development, we came up with 3 concepts, because everything was theory. You know, there was no curriculum, and but the trainer taught us that one caring adult relationship had the power of changing a student's life path, and that in order to be that one adult, I call it the power of one now, but in order to be that adult, we had to remain regulated when the students were dysregulated. So first thing we learned was we had to put our personal mirror down, and I'll tell you, a kid could trigger me just as quick as I could trigger them.
I'm sure, yeah.
And all of a sudden, learning that, hey, I can't trigger. I've got to stay calm. And the second thing that we learned was not to take them on in the moment. And you know, it was like, my God, I was bringing these kids in when they were totally dysregulated. I'd get dysregulated, and then the discipline would be maybe a more severe than than the infraction was. But so we learned about putting our personal mirror down and to allowing them time to calm down. And then when we did that and we brought them in, and it's so powerful, is we started asking them, what's going on?
Yeah, the what happened to you kind of question.
Yeah, you know, a question that I always ask is, on a scale of 1 to 10, where's your stress? I have to know what their ACEs were. I knew our kids had high ACE score. And so when a kid would say, I have my you know, I'm at an 8, I'd say, man, nobody can handle an 8. I can't handle an 8. Man, we got to get you some support. And when we took that, all of a sudden that became a teachable moment. So then I'm teaching them about their regulation. I'm teaching them other options of rather than blowing up, what are some other options we can do? And then we gave them some choices that they could make by advocating for themselves when they felt like they were going to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we put those systems in place. What we noticed is our kids started advocating for it. So a kid would come by my office and say, "Hey, Sporleder, I'm going in the red. I need a timeout." And we would say, "That's awesome. You're listening to yourself." And we would give them a timeout. And what happened is they were catching it before they became dysregulated. So they would take the timeout regulated, and they'd go back to class regulated. And
Amazing. Yeah.
that changed our whole school culture.
Beautiful.
And the power of a student, and I find this so much today when I'm out working with kids and I'm meeting them for the first time. And you ask them, I want to hear your voice. They want to talk to you.
Yeah.
And that's what I noticed with my kids. I started seeking their voice, and they talked to me. And then it was, oh my goodness, I was suspending kids and not ever hearing what the issues were.
Sure.
So all of a sudden, there were these powerful conversations, and I would be in the back of my head thinking, oh my gosh, how'd they make it to school today? And so that's what really began to change our culture as we came together as a staff and really put that circle of support around our kids. Our kids started to flourish, and so our data, you can imagine going into school was out of control. I mean, I was dealing with about 1,200 discipline referrals with a pretty small school at that time, and our data, the improvement in our data in just 1 year caught the attention of Jane Stevens from Aces Too High.
Right.
And Jane wrote an article about us and our data. And the article went viral. In fact, it went viral twice on Aces Too High. I believe it's had now over 1 million hits.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, I was getting emails from people from all over the world. I mean,
Sure.
Russia. It was very overwhelming. And to be honest with you, I couldn't get my head wrapped around it. But that kind of put us on the map, so to say.
Sure. Well, having seen the movie, and I didn't know much about it in advance. I'd seen Resilience first, and then I saw Paper Tigers at an event where I was talking myself. It was more about prevention, partnership, and family support by our Child Protection Agency. But it was really interesting to see how becoming trauma-informed and responsive is done, and how the relationships are really everything. Or an awful lot of it anyway, you know. And as you say, safety actually has to be the cornerstone, because if you don't feel safe, you can't relate, you can't think, you can't take a time out. So how, I suppose, can you tell me a few ways about, other than the initial more disciplinarian aspect, how you went about establishing safety for the kids, the teenagers, but also for the staff? Because like a parent, the staff must feel safe and regulated as well in order for that to pass on to the kids, I guess.
Yeah, you said relationships are everything. It was everything. And we came together as a staff, and it drove all of our conversations were around relationships. When kids were struggling, it was, hey, who's connected? And when we did our action plans, we kind of put plants in that kid's day in which we would have staff making intentional, positive connections with those kids. Some before lunch, some after lunch. And so that we all came around that. And to me, that's what creates the safety of the environment. And, you know, our goal, once we got it, our goal was to help transform those kids' lives.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, I those kids transformed me,
I'm
and those
sure.
kids changed my life, and I've never been the same in my life. Still being transformed by these kids, and uh, I could never give back as much as what my kids have given me, and kids that I meet on the road. My goodness, I'm still getting blessed, and so it's such a powerful approach. And for educators, sometimes the barrier is we can't forego the academics.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I would say you're not going to get to the academics until you create the safety and the connection.
For sure. Like Bruce Perry's lovely saying, for dealing with traumatized kids is regulate, relate, reason. And that applies to all of us, regardless of our age, our chronological age. You know, we're not going to be at our best cognitively if we're at 8 on the Richter scale of stress, as you said before. But Jim, so some of the kids in the movie, you know, they disclosed certain situations that they were dealing with. I remember one young man who got very into acting and was very gifted, who was the son of a single parent, and he was kind of her caregiver and was very quiet, but dealing with the burden of of that as a young man, and then a young girl who'd survived a sexual assault, and there was pretty much everything in between. And one thing that struck me, that in an Irish context, and I'm sure would seem a bit strange elsewhere as well, was, you know, say adult male teachers texting kids and kind of going, someone might disappear for a few days and they'd be checking in and say, I love you, buddy, or whatever. I imagine some more old school teachers would just think this is boundary violation or inappropriate somehow. And yet it really seemed to mean the world to kids. It was part of that being held in mind, and that people were thinking of them. And even though they'd gone AWOL for a week or two, people wanted them back and were concerned about them. Does that ever come up as a kind of fear of mainstream schools, that, you know, we must mind ourselves and watch ourselves and not get too friendly or not be loving because what might people think?
Uh, I, I would I would never stop or not encourage people to be loving,
Mm-hmm.
because when I love a kid and I tell a kid I love them, kids know what's creepy and what's not.
Indeed, they do. Yeah.
I've always shared that kids' intuition, you go with their intuition.
Mm.
And so um, I I used to tell kids, I love you guys,
Yeah.
but the relationships got to the point where I was able to say, you know what, I love you, I care about you, I care about your safety.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to be careful. I told my gang kids that all the time. But
And how do you think it made them feel? Did they ever say anything about hearing those words from someone?
you know, it was kind of humorous. Some of my more active gang kids that I knew were very active on the streets outside of school.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had both opposite gangs in the building, and they stepped up on my expectations that the colors stay outside of the building and you don't bring them in.
Right.
And they were very respectful of that. It doesn't mean that we weren't talking a lot about it, and I was letting them know I appreciated it when they were doing it right. And if I saw something that didn't look right, that what you said earlier, intervention creates prevention.
Mm-hmm.
But it was very interesting that even some of my more, I'd say, hardcore gang kids, I would tell them I love them in my office, blinds shut, door shut, and they would turn before they left my office and they'd say, I love you too, Sporleder.
Uh,
But it was interesting. They would walk out the door with that hitch,
yeah.
because they had to have, they had to put that persona on.
Yeah.
But it just showed me how much they hungered to be loved
Yeah.
and wanted to be cared about. I never gave out my cell phone number. I didn't text kids. I didn't do
Mm.
Facebook. So I'm not out there saying we need to be texting our kids. When we had a kid that we didn't know where they were at, we had Brooke, and Brooke went searching. And our kids were very good about talking to us. We could pull our kids in and just say, hey, we're really worried about so-and-so. You got any leads for us that we can follow to see if we can make sure they're okay and safe?
Mm.
And I found that when we approached it that way, kids knew we were family, and if they knew that kid needed help, they were very very open if they
Mm.
knew how to help us. So I know there's hugging in the movie that some people have brought that up. I did
Well,
the man hug. I did the man hug with kids. The shoulder bump. I didn't hug girls. The frontal hugs. I didn't do that. However, there were times I would turn and a girl
and
would
they
be.
might hug you.
But I learned. You learn. I mean, I wasn't going to reject, but I learned that if I bent over and patted them on the back, that I created distance.
Mm. And
So
that can feel like a wound then to someone, maybe, if that's what they need. But it was just an interesting thing as an observer, and I only really mention it because in Ireland, like many countries where there have been violations of children's safety in the past, I can see sometimes how people deliberately want more distance rather than more connection because of some of those historical issues. And yet from watching the movie, it was so clear that it was being held in mind and being thought of when previously maybe their absence would have just slipped through the cracks or whatever. And Bessel van der Kolk's thing about people needing to be seen and known, I think that comes across very nicely as well, was that you guys as a team were just so concerned about people and so in their corner and wanting them to do well. And even if they had a major hiccup, you were there to kind of hold them, that concept of holding and containing the distress as much as he could, because he couldn't live with them. They were still going home to whatever.
it's all about reframing the language. And so when we had kids that were not coming to school, we pulled them and their parents in. And the message that we gave was, hey, we are a dog on a bone when it comes to attendance. And even if Brooke has to come out to your home with the school van and knock on the door to get you up out of bed to bring you to school, we're willing to do that. And though we don't want to take you to court, if we have to take you to court to get you here, we'll do that, because we can't function knowing that you're not here. You mean that much to us. And when you frame it that way,
Yeah.
even though in the beginning some would be very angry that we were pursuing them on attendance, but those same kids, say as freshmen, sophomores, when they gave their senior reports in their senior years, I can't tell you how many, it was usually girls that broke down in the middle of their presentation and turned to Brooke and said, Brooke, if you didn't threaten to take me to court, or if you hadn't taken me to court, or if you hadn't pursued me, I wouldn't be here today. Thank you. And so finally, the kids, when it's presented that way, so I told them, if we disappear and we're not on your doorstep, then we gave up on you and don't care. And I said, but that's not going to happen. We're going to keep you back.
And that's probably what a lot of children have experienced throughout their lives is this tendency to give up on them rather quickly. You know, the messages from teenagers or from teachers maybe before they got to that school was perhaps you're no good, or you've learning problems, or you're going nowhere fast. And so to have you guys not give up on them was something kind of remarkable. And they graduated then, which also was an achievement in itself for many kids. Jim, so in essence, what is your understanding then, having come through this remarkable journey, you know, as an educator? What is the essence of being a trauma-informed teacher or school? Is it, you know, is there a step-by-step guide to approaching children and the curriculum, or is it more of an ethos, or is it perhaps a combination?
You know, I don't mean to be redundant, but I keep coming back to it's my understanding of the power of one, so that it's who I am. It drives everything I do. I want connection. I want relationships. And when that is done as a building and your staff comes together around that as well, it creates such a culture. I mean, when our kids came back from even just the weekend, when we greeted them out front, it was, oh, it's so good to be back with the family.
Mm.
Or come back from vacation. Vacation was horrible. You know, we were all
Yeah.
frustrated. You got to come back too quick, you know.
Yeah.
And but our kids, we were the family, and we created that environment for them. And so I think it's coming around that concept. You know, not every kid, you know, it's not like I brought every kid into my office and said, you know, we love you. That they said, oh, thank you so much. I mean,
Yes.
I got the, you don't effing love me, you
Yeah.
know. It's, kids respond at different times, but we have to be consistent in the message.
Mm-hmm.
We had kids that it took 2 years before they bought in.
Mm-hmm.
But some kids would respond much sooner, but we had some kids that were dealing with a lot of issues, and it took them a while to come around.
Well, I guess they had to feel that you were trustworthy and that it was real, because those defenses were there for a jolly good reason, I imagine, and they were protecting them against being hurt, or you know, or trusting and opening up only to be disappointed once again by adults in their lives.
Yeah.
So it's not hard for me, from the little I know now, to understand why some people have greater prickles than others, or resistance to loving, kind messages, because they don't feel safe and familiar. Even, you know, if neglect or abuse feel familiar, then messages of love must be and kindness and worth must be a bit destabilizing in the beginning for some kids.
I mean, if you take an alternative high school like we were, and the level of our kids, my last year averaged 5.5 aces. That's like running an ER room.
Mm.
I mean, we were in crisis management, but we were doing the interventions.
Yes.
And when you said hard work, that's hard work. It's very hard emotionally.
Mm.
But when you invest those kinds of interventions, again, it creates the preventions of the crisis going over the edge or
Mm-hmm.
over the top. You can almost pull it back in. And so we were willing to invest whatever we needed to invest in order to keep that predictability and that safety together. And then when we joined and had our community partners come in around the families in crises, our families who were very, you know, how does our system treat them? Horribly.
Mm.
Our families would come in, and there would be community partners all contributing to wrapping support around that family. So when that parent stood up, they're being hugged by these caseworkers, and they were able to see, hey, it's not just Lincoln that cares about me. There's other people in the community that care about me. I really saw that as a positive model as well.
Yeah, so expanding the parents' connections to the community and buffering them. I mean, Nadine Burke-Harris is great on that, that kind of when the adults in children's lives get the help that they need, children are natural beneficiaries then of the, I guess, the improved regulation and maybe just the slightly reduced stress burden, or having people to talk to and feeling like, you know, we're not alone anymore. That's so much of it really, isn't it? The kind of, because trauma isolates people. So the feeling that I am not alone in all of this and I'm not worthless is massive.
You know, Jane, my biggest learning has been, and if I was able to go back, if there was one thing that I would change, is truly understanding the power of one, and the power of those caring adult relationships. Is I wish I could have gone back, and with the knowledge I have now, I would have gotten a community mentor program, so that my seniors, when we released them and they graduated, I could have given them to a caring adult to help them work through the complex systems that we have.
Sure.
And then when I look back and reflect on the kids where they are now, they're 24, 27 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
I think the youngest are 22.
Mm-hmm.
Is that those kids that have kept some contact with a caring adult are functioning pretty darn well. Kids who may have been really thriving but have allowed themselves to fall away from the caring adult could be struggling right now.
Okay.
So it really shows me the power of relationship, and it really shows me that now I have so many of my kids on Facebook now, but it allows me to share with them, and still be in a teachable moment, that when you're going through these difficult times, go to the people you know that have your back, that are going to speak the truth, whether you like the message or not. You know it's the truth, and they will walk with you. And that's the message I try to teach the kids when I'm on the road, is stay connected to that caring adult, because if you let go of them and get distance, life can be real hard doing it on our own.
Of course it can. And Jim, one thing that I'm sure teachers or principals who might be interested in, you know, in becoming more responsive to kids with trauma might kind of go, well, what about the burden on us? As staff, you mentioned that there is an emotional toll. It's not easy. It's very fulfilling, but, you know, it can be, maybe there can be secondary trauma or that type of thing. What did you do to help support your staff in this this process and this journey?
That's another great question. Mindfulness and self-care. You got to remember, we were 10, 11 when our first year of implementation. So we didn't have a lot of those resources.
Yeah.
A lot of knowledge on that. But what I noticed is how my staff took care of one another.
Right.
So part of that relationship piece and checking in piece, if the staff was having a difficult day or a difficult time, there'd be 2 staff in their room checking on them. Mm-hmm. And I saw how effective that was. And not to say that I think much more could have happened around self-care, but seeing that happen was very powerful. It's only been in the last year that I've started to share, but I made sure I took care of everybody. Mm-hmm. I made sure I took care of my kids. I made sure I took care of my staff, but I didn't take care of myself.
Okay.
And, you know, when you're the excuse me, the leader, it's, you know, that saying, it's lonely at the top.
Yeah, sure.
You don't have somebody that you can process with. you got to you're keeping the ship going.
Yeah.
Not too many people were aware, but I actually crashed the summer after the film.
Okay.
And stress caught up to me. I would have told you there's no way I could have crashed.
Mm-hmm. Running on adrenaline probably, and also just the belief in what you were doing was so positive.
Can't, you know, you tend to carry some of those students' pain.
Mm-hmm.
That carries on you. And then our state adopted the nation's most punitive graduation requirements, and I was so angry with
Right.
that I tried to take the state legislators on.
Okay. As if you hadn't enough to be doing. Yeah.
I mean, literally, my wife would call me at school and say, "Honey, you got to come home."
Right.
And I lost track of time. It'd be 6:30 at night. But when I got home, I'd eat dinner and I'd go straight on to Twitter.
Right.
I had somebody teaching me,
Yeah.
and I would try to fight them.
Right.
I contacted every major newspaper in Seattle. I did everything I could to try to expose what was happening, because truly it was horrible what we did to kids. And I would stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning doing that every night. And
Right. You wore yourself out.
Caught up to me, and I crashed, and my coping skill was anger.
Right.
And it comes with that, a little bit with that athletic background. And, you know,
Okay.
if you get knocked down, you get up before the other person gets up. You never let anybody know they got the best of you. And it was like my wife, she pulled me aside and just broke down and said, "I'm watching my husband die every night that you come home." And you would think that would get my attention.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I was like, "Honey, why are you crying? I'm fine. I'm fine." And she says that our girls, that they think I'm keeping stuff from them. They know you're not doing well. And I said, "What do you mean I'm not doing well? I'm doing fine. Tell the girls I'm fine." You know, I just wouldn't come to the realization. I mean, even inside, I knew I wasn't doing very well at all.
Yeah.
But my anger, you know, it's like, you can't knock me down, so I'm fine, because I would get back up. But I got knocked down, and I ended up having to take an early retirement.
Right. Okay.
Took me a full year to heal.
Okay.
So when I talk with teachers and stuff, this last year I share my story, and I share how important it is to start taking care of ourselves. You know, I've lost 60 pounds. I walk. I don't tell people what they should do, because I think everybody has their own interests. But for me, I have a mentor, and he taught me balance exercise with gratitude. And it took me a year before I was able to took me a year to understand, to express my gratitude when things weren't going my way.
Sure.
And that understand there was a lesson.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that, because it is kind of, again, it's like the parents. If parents are so under stress and not minding themselves and unsupported, well, how can they do a great job? You know, or they can for a while, but it eventually comes at a cost. And so I think the same applies to principals and teachers, that you can give an awful lot of yourself, but you can't keep giving endlessly without something giving. And so to watch that, and that if schools are going to do this type of wonderful heart-centered approach, then we do need to mind ourselves in the process. and someone needs to mind the principals, I guess, because if it is lonely at the top, then there need to be some kind of supports there, whether it's, you know, supervision of some sort, or just networks of sharing. Because I've heard that from principals here who are trying to do a similar model, that, you know, there's so much administration and minding of other people, and your mind is probably going a mile a minute non-stop. So
I think we as adults and we as leaders need a caring adult in our lives.
yeah, there you go. The power of one even there. Yeah, for sure.
My mentor, I mean, he's 6 hours away, and we keep in constant contact, and I've learned so much from him, and it just keeps things so much more balanced.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah. And Jim, thank you for your time. I don't want to intrude too much longer for you, but in the light of this pandemic that we're experiencing globally, are you concerned that kids with high levels of stress, adversity, and trauma in their families and in their communities, but more specifically their families, I guess, right now, that you know, they no longer have the respite of school and their network of supportive adults if they attend somewhere like Lincoln?
uh, I have to really work on my self-care, because I'm carrying a very, very heavy heart, because I know there's kids out there that have not turned in their packets to their teachers or haven't done their work, that are going to be seen as lazy.
Mm-hmm.
By God, we got to hold them accountable. They haven't done a thing.
Yeah.
And yet I'm in contact with a high school kid who's told me, I'm so overwhelmed, I don't know what to do.
Mm.
It's not that I can't, I don't know where to start. And so I think we have so many of those kids, and we got these chaotic homes there. We don't have any structure there. There's no safety there.
Mm.
And yet we want these kids to sit down and do all these packets. And I get it that there's not a lot of options. I mean, there's the packets, the Chromebooks.
Mm.
You know, I get the teachers are limited in how they can do that. Some have been very creative in having some face-to-face contact. But I hope I'm wrong, Jane, but I really think that we're going to see kids coming back more dysregulated than we've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to see kids who left us that seemed fairly regulated, that the changes in their family dynamics because of parents losing jobs,
Sure.
I think we're going to see stress there. And as you shared so well earlier when we were talking, I think we got teachers that are super stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't have this mindfulness around regulation, dysregulated adults and dysregulated kids is not a good match, and only creates more dysregulation and chaos. And that's my concern, and my message as teachers are coming back is to, if we're going to create safety, we need to spend some time on social and emotional learning, and to allow these kids to come in and settle down and feel that sense of safety and connection before we even bring any academics up.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
we won't get to academics if we don't. Those kids are going to be so dysregulated that we're not even going to get to academics. But it's going to take leaders leading this and giving teachers permission to help settle our kids back in. You know, if we take the approach, you know, we got to hit it, man. These kids have been out of school. We got kids that haven't done a darn thing. We got to get them caught up. And if we come with that approach, I think we're going to blow them up.
Mm. And you guys, in America now are dealing not only with the pandemic, but with lots of protests and riots in some quarters because of the homicide at the hands of the police by George Floyd, an African-American man. And this is not the first and probably won't be the last such homicide. As an educator, did you experience much how racism and things like instability due to maybe immigration status, or the judgments of white people towards people who are Black and brown, that could have a really harmful toll on how they felt in the world, how safe they felt around other people? And did that impact ability to learn, do you think?
In Walla Walla, we have about 39%, I think, Latino.
Okay.
We're dependent upon the agricultural work that, we're a wine dynasty here.
Okay.
And it's frustrating because we don't give our Latino community the credit that they deserve. But what I learned at Lincoln, and what I've learned while on the road, I have not had any experience working with all Black kids.
Sure.
But I can go into a Black school and ask to meet with kids, and I can connect with those Black kids because if my intention is I want to have a positive interaction with you, and I want to value your voice and validate your feelings, and I'm seeking that from you,
Mm-hmm.
I think it takes the racial divide down. And like I've said, these kids I meet on the road, whether they're from foster care and have had horrible abuse and what have you, they have taught me so much. But when they know that you care about their voice, the other stuff falls to the side. And I think we're always trying to figure everybody's problems out.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of going and asking them to teach us on what they need. One of my Black friends, and I'm really trying to figure this white privilege thing out. I've been on a 3-year mission on this. And I have just some amazing Black friends that I've met across the country, and that I've been able to share this with, and they've been so open. And one shared with me, Jim, we have to have you a part of the conversation. Walk with us. Let us take the lead.
Uh-huh.
But walk with us. And I thought that was so powerful, and I think it kind of reiterates what I'm trying to say is we've got to have their voice.
Yes.
And
Their needs. Yeah.
Validate.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows their need better than they do.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows their community better than they do.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to hear how we can team with them and make their dreams come true, and make their wishes become a reality. And so my learning curve is straight up, but it's been one that's close to my heart. And even in America, where we've dropped the suspension rates in districts, I was in a district in which they were actually invited to the White House and given an award for how much they had dropped their suspension rates. And the superintendent, I addressed his leadership team, but before I got up, he said, even though we have been recognized for dropping our suspensions, our disproportionality is still there.
Right.
And that is very common in our country, is that even though we're dropping suspension rates, the disproportionality between our students of color and our white kids is still way out of whack and needs to be addressed, because we're not addressing apples and oranges. it's for the same offense. One goes, one
Right.
stays. And
so this absence of equity.
yeah, I try to really confront that as much as I possibly can, because for me, it doesn't seem like it's that hard to address. All I got to do is track my data.
Yeah, right. Okay. I like it. Yeah.
The spreadsheet's very easy to use. The data sort, I could monthly go in and track my suspensions and check my disproportionality.
Yeah.
And if it's out of whack, then
something needs to be done.
And that for me, it comes back on me as the leader. And my expectations.
Thank you, Jim. Just one final question, because the theme of this overall Law and Justice series recorded during lockdown is about how to talk policy and influence people. So as a trauma-informed education expert, what changes do you think are most needed in educational policy?
A voice. I think we've pushed the teachers and the educators completely out of the policy arena. And so policy, especially in our country, educational policy is driven by non-educators who have no clue.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, excuse me, I'm very frustrated with that. We're punitive. We have policies that have no research at all behind it. We're grading teachers on student testing. There's no research that supports that. We're firing teachers because of student testing. There's no research on that. You're asking the right question, but I just feel like we're so disconnected, because if I, as a politician, understand this, then I'm going to be front loading with intervention. I'm going to be supporting the interventions that need to be happening rather than backloading the prisons.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we
the
have
healthcare burden.
Yeah, we have a penitentiary here in Washington, in Walla Walla. It's been here since the 1800s. They just went through a massive expansion. Billions of dollars of all the prisons on the eastern side of the mountains, and they're all crying now about overcrowding. I mean, it's only been within 5-6 years that the expansion was done, and now we're back to where we were before the expansion was started.
Yeah. And
what I see and to be honest with you, I've been asked to be a part of some stuff in Washington D.C. and I guess I get a little feisty. I just ask them straight up. I don't want to be a part of a congressional hearing that talks about the problem and then we all walk away.
Yeah.
Where's the funding? If
yes.
we're going to talk about the problem, then we got to talk about the funding. If we don't have the funding, to me, it means nothing. It means nothing to me.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to talk about toxic stress, the impact it has on our communities, but we're not going to do any proactive work.
Yeah,
it's just a false front. With me, it's our Native Americans.
Right.
They've been lied to so many times, and I work with a lot of tribes, and so I've been able to hear their voice. And I was asked to be a part of a hearing, and I said, "Where's the money?"
Yeah.
Well, we're here to be proactive. And I said, "Where's the money?"
Well,
we don't have any
question.
money. And I said, "You're talking about our national budget, that we can't fund our Native Americans, that we've stolen their land from them. We've abused them horribly." Mm-hmm. But we're gonna say, yeah, they're really hurting. They're really traumatized.
And that's it. Yeah.
That's it. So, as you can tell, that kind of hits a spot with me. But
No, it's great. I agree entirely. And I was talking to Dr. Wendy Ellis, who you may know from the Pair of Aces graphic, you know, about adverse community environments. And she's a wonderful public health expert who talks about building community resilience, but the need to tackle systemic inequity and racism. And she was saying, you know, we value what we spend money on. Simple as. If we don't, and from my own prison research, I know that California a few years ago spent more money on prisons than it did on educating children. So that tells us a lot about a skewed value system. And as you say, early intervention and prevention and family supports and school supports would make far more sense than filling prisons full of broken men and women later on.
And in the prisons, we want to punish them, so we've taken out all the educational opportunities and the trade opportunities, so that when these men and women are released from our prison systems, they have absolutely no job skills to go back out and to be employed, versus why aren't we investing in education and treating and training them in the trades, so that when they leave, they have a skill. It just, we have it backwards.
We have it a bit backwards. Well, Jim Sporleder, thank you so much for talking to me. We're ending on a somewhat glum note, but at the same time, I hope that there will be opportunities to reset values, you know, that this pandemic and the instability and chaos that's around us might force us all to look at what kind of a world do we want to live in, and how do we want to support children and families, or what values do we actually want to nurture.
And I'm glad, I think that's a good spot to end on, is that there are positive things happening. I mean, we have a national wave going across our country right now. It's building momentum all the time. I get a little impatient. I want it to happen quicker, and it's gone international. So, I mean, this is an international shared vision, and like I said, we're all on the same team, and hopefully we're supporting one another along the way.
Hopefully. Well, thank you, Jim, so much for being so generous with your time. I've learned a lot. I admire what you've achieved so far so much, and thank you for all that you've done and will continue to do during lockdown and afterwards, and whether you participate in one of these government policy sessions or not. But I think your mantra is a good one. Where is the money? You know, how much are they going to pony up? I'll use that myself in the future. But this has been How to Talk Policy and Influence People. I'm Jane Mulcahy. I was speaking to Jim Sporleder. Thank you so much, Jim, and best of luck with everything going forward.
Thank you.